Alright, welcome to Ancient Chinese. We're going to go through your final review. So feel free to print this thing out, have it available, fast forward and rewind as necessary. Alright, so number one. What characteristic was common among both early Chinese leaders and the biblical account of leaders who emerged directly after the flood? So this is their long lifespans, right? So both the early Chinese records and the early biblical records talk about the first few generations after the flood as having much longer lifespans than what we see today, 200 years and up, right? Okay. What does it mean that the Chinese is the only continuously used script from antiquity? So basically what this means is that now we're talking about scripts. This is not spoken language, this is written language. All of the other written languages have undergone drastic changes from antiquity to now. Even the Hebrew language no longer uses the old pictures. They've gone to a new form of script, right? And so Chinese is the only language today that is still using a script from antiquity, right? Number three, list and describe the two major types of language. So this is the basic language categories, right? So the first one is ideographic, right, which is what Chinese and Hebrew are, and that means they take symbols that combine to form concepts, right? And then the other one is phonetic, right, and that's how English is, and that's the symbols just carry a sound, and that's all, right? Okay. Number four, explain in your words the difference between the Chinese language and the Hebrew language, right? So what we're after here is something to the effect that the Hebrew language had an alphabet of symbols, and through the combinations of those created all of their words. Whereas the Chinese made each word its own symbol, right? And so they have thousands of symbols, right? Whereas the Hebrew made a language, an alphabet of symbols, and each word is made up of a variety of symbols, but it's the same 22 symbols every time. Whereas in the Chinese, there are thousands of symbols that are put together. Alright, number five. List and describe in your own words 3 of the examples given in class of Chinese words that carry images from the book of Genesis. So this is the one I want you to do on your own. We have a video, ancient Chinese words from Genesis, like a part 1 and part 2 in the class. So we did a couple lessons on that. So I want you to go back in and give me 3 words, right? And explain what the symbolism meant, right? So if you're going to do the word for shame or something, then go back in and tell me what we said about what that word, what the symbols were and what they meant. Okay. Number 6, what was the name that the Chinese gave to the one supreme God? It was Shang Dai. Shangdi. Shang Dai. They also called him, in many of the references, the name above all names, which is kind of cool. Alright, number 7, what were the Chinese forbidden to do in reference to God, which was very similar to a restriction that God gave the Hebrews? And that was they were not allowed to make graven images of the one true God. So you think about all of the symbolism and the images and all the kind of stuff they've got over there in China, and in the ancient world they weren't allowed to make any kind of graven image or any kind of idol of the one true God. Alright. Number 8, explain the implication of the word Dai in the Chinese name for God. So something to the effect that almost every early culture in antiquity has this word Dai in it, in reference to God. It's where we get our word divinity from, and divine. And so this also is a strong indication of common origin for many of the nations coming out of Noah's Ark, right? That the name for God is consistent through much of antiquity, right? Or at least that part of it, right? The di part. It's very common. It's where we get the theos in Greece. As in theology, theos, that comes from dios, which comes from die, so all of that is connected. Alright, explain how it is possible that the ancient Chinese would have a revelation of sacrifice even before the time that God revealed it to Moses. So the way that this is possible is that the revelations that God gave to Noah, right, would have spread through the early cultures. Now, much of it was lost, and God had to come in and reinforce things and be very specific and very clear and very revelatory for Moses, right? And the Hebrew culture benefited from God's direct revelation. But many of the early cultures still had in them at least the foundation of things that Noah and the godly line before the flood had known about God and had passed on to these first generations after the flood. Okay, number 10. Explain in your own words 3 parts of the great sacrifice that are compatible with things God taught the Hebrews concerning the Day of Atonement. So I want you to go back in, look at the video, and find 3 things that are compatible, right? So we talked about that Chinese ritual was much more compatible with the Day of Atonement than it was just regular everyday sacrifices. And so I want you to come up with 3 parts of that that were compatible, comparable, or parallels to the Hebrew ceremony, right? All right, number 11. List 3 benefits that were associated with the ancient Chinese blood covenant, right? So you can go back in and look at that video, but it's going to be basically military protection was one, covenant of peace between them was one. It was often associated with blessing is another one. And so, you know, if there's other ones that you want to do, but those 3 are 3 of the general ideas: military protection, peace between them, and mutual blessing. And those are help shed some light on the potential expectation or understanding that Abraham would have had when God performed the blood covenant with him as he passed through the animals as the torch and the smoking fire pot. Okay. Number 12. Describe in your own words the story about how Christianity almost had a major breakthrough into the nation of China. So I want you to put this one into your own words. Go back in and watch that video. It's the last one for the class, and kind of put that that story into your own narrative. You don't have to be super long, but you know, maybe a paragraph or less. You know, but just something to kind of give me the understanding that you know the gist of that story, right? Number 13, explain in your own words the reasoning given in class as to how the early Chinese shared revelations about God that are also seen in the early Hebrew culture. So this one is just the main principle of the class, that dating back to Noah, we all have this common ancestry, and then even to the Tower of Babel, many of the nations were still united. But then when God came down and destroyed the tower, or scattered them at the Tower of Babel, the Chinese nation was formed then, as the Siamese fled even further east, right? And so that common ancestry is really the principle of the class, that because we have common ancestry, you can expect to find common themes in their understanding about the Lord early in their history. And as time goes on, they lose that distinction and those principles. But if we look early enough, there should be some common themes that shed light on their common ancestry dating back to Noah. Okay? Alright, so if you watch your videos, you should have no trouble with this one. It's not a real long final. So if you go back in and review this, you should have no issues.